So I want to start first with scarcity. Scarcity, and this is a slide I want to spend as much time as possible on because this is where most of our information comes from. Scarcity is the reality of us human beings living in an imperfect world. This is a paradise. There's only so much water, almost only so much land, only so much time. So therefore, scarcity is the very beginning of economics. It's the very beginning of our reasons for having government. We don't live in a cloud, and we don't eat manna for breakfast every day. We live in a real world that is tough, it's harsh, and our fight for survival is a fight with scarcity. That's the start of economics, and it's the start of our examination of property rights, of the environment, and the issues associated with that. So then when I ask now, what is scarcity? We have scarcity across the board. I don't think I have to go through them all, from natural resources, energy, water, etc. Right? We understand that. There's scarcity across the board. So then, where the environmentalists come in with scarcity, they accept scarcity. It's a reality. And what they say is this: why do forests get ravaged then? Why do fish get there's overfishing in the fisheries? There's too few fish. Pollution. In other words, their question is, what causes this depletion of the resources? Because we know there's scarcity. Acting on that scarcity, we use up too much and it's gone. What causes that? Well, they say obviously what we heard earlier. It's free market capitalism. It's greed. It's the profit motive. And we have to take that seriously when thinking about scarcity. And so my first question is, why does it have to be that way? Because if we look at things, for example, grain production. In other words, if they say because of evil capitalism, the US isn't one big forest anymore, at least the eastern half of the country used to be this one vast primeval forest. And if they see that as a huge mistake, why isn't it that way anymore? I mean, why isn't it the same case as wheat? Why haven't we run out of wheat? Why haven't we run out of copper? Although copper prices are kind of high right now. But why haven't these things disappeared also, if capitalist greed is to blame? We see disparity, and they admit that disparity, and they explain it with some of the things we heard before. But in that right there is the key to the answer we're looking for. Because capitalist greed, as the economist Murray Rothbard likes to say, the reason you have so much scarcity and so much depletion of resources in the fisheries or the forests, and you don't see that in wheat, in copper, and other resources, is because capitalist greed wasn't allowed to operate. And we'll go into that. So the reason is, if you have private ownership of something, with your little farm in the forest, you're no longer just crashing and burning. Your private property, your reason, your incentives to produce on that land, to produce more, because you have ownership of it, you have an incentive to not pollute resources and to find alternatives, etc. So if we look at an example, think of a copper mine. Just to use one simplistic example, but it has a lot of truth in it. If you think of yourself as the owner of the copper mine, why hasn't copper run out yet? Well, maybe it's going to take 50 years, someone might say. But right now it hasn't. And the reason for these things, the reason why iron ore hasn't run out, the reason why we haven't run out of coal, and we've been using it like crazy for 200 years, the reason for this disparity and the answer to why some forests have disappeared completely and copper hasn't disappeared. Well, first of all, with the forests, there is a choice that has to be made. I mean, if the forest was primeval like it was in 1492, Columbus shouldn't have gotten off the boat, the Pilgrims shouldn't have gotten off the boat. So there is one choice that has to be made there, and that comes with what we said about valuing human life, human existence, above maybe some of the other things in the world. That's the first point. The second point, of course, is that with the ownership of the copper mine, let's say the price is going up in 6 months, and you expect that. What you have is a capital value in the mine. So let's say that it's worth 100 million. Your copper mine's worth 100 million. You could go right now and be an evil capitalist and exploit it and dig out all 100 million and be out today, and you'd make a profit on the market of some kind, assuming that there's demand for copper. So why don't they do that? Why wouldn't you, as a mine owner, go through and just exploit the mine and dig everything out? Well, the reason, of course, is that if you want to sell shares of the mine later, or if you want to sell the mine itself, if you deplete the capital value of it now, it's not going to be worth anything in the future. All the copper is gone. That's the first reason. So this is the free market mechanism that prevents resources from being completely depleted. The second aspect is the price. Let's say you're judging the market, and this is really important to look at it from the perspective of the entrepreneur. the owner of a mine is an entrepreneur. Typically, in literature and media today, we think of entrepreneurs as people who are starting just new businesses, just fresh businesses. In terms of decision-making in the market, an entrepreneur could be the CEO of a 50-year-old company. It could be the decision makers in a mom and pop that's 100 years old. It's the people who are making predictions and looking at the market and looking at what they envision to happen in the next few months, the next years, anticipating or attempting to anticipate consumer needs and desires. And those are the entrepreneurs who are successful. If you think that tomorrow the market is going to demand just an extraordinary amount of bicycles, and you invest all your money in bicycles, and people don't want to buy bicycles, they want to buy motorcycles, you're going to go broke. And that's what the free market. That's the way the free market works. Is that it allows both good and bad entrepreneurs to attempt something. The good ones, the ones who are able to anticipate consumer desires, and in some cases create new things that consumers want. They're the ones who please consumers are the ones who succeed. That's the way a free market works. I'm not arguing that's the way our country is organized right now, fully as it should, but that's the way a market works, and that's actually the real democracy. And that's the kind of democracy that we want, is a democracy of consumers, where we reward the firms that do what's right in our eyes and put the rest of the ones that don't. And that comes into play here with scarcity. So the mine owner, he owns the mine, he's anticipating prices are going to go up. So the first reason that prevents him from just pillaging the mine and depleting the resources is that he anticipates that if he does so, it won't be worth anything in the future because he's depleted the capital value. Secondly, he anticipates prices to go up to 6 months, so he pares down production now. What that does is it smooths out fluctuations in the price, because in 6 months from now, the price will rise some. He's a successful entrepreneur. He'll ramp up production, he'll make a profit, he'll sell copper at a profitable price, he'll make money, he'll provide copper to consumers where they need it, and then that will, because of his ramped up production, that will lower the price in the future, which will smooth it out. And so the second part of that is he wants to keep his capital value, he wants to make a profit, so he pares down or increases production, anticipating price. And then the next aspect in that mechanism is the time value. Money is interest rates, time preference. Interest rates are an indication of consumers' time preference. In other words, people are saving less now and consuming more. If they're saving less or consuming more, they're putting off future savings. They're putting off current savings, and they're putting off future consumption. So what that does is that then will indicate to the mine owner that he should probably produce more now. People are spending now. Interest rates are higher. If that changes and people start to save more, there's a larger pool of savings available in the economy, that means interest rates are going to go down. And that indicates to the mine owner that people are putting off consumption instead of, for the present, putting it off in the future. He will lower his production and make the copper available to people in the future where they want it. This is essentially how it works. There's another aspect to it, and that is the very simplest one, in that he owns the mine. And that might sound redundant, but if the mine was owned by the government, he was simply leasing it, his interest wouldn't be with market value, for one. He doesn't have that. He doesn't have that sort of incentive to do what's best in terms of production for the consumer, because all he has to do is extract as much as he can. The last part of that scenario has to do, again, with the price. So we talked about the time preference, the interest rates, and the price in terms of just his judgment of it. But if the price does indeed go up because there's just increased demand, China's buying a lot of copper, it's going up in price, what then does the entrepreneur do? Well, he might ramp up production. He might look for more sources of copper, etc., if it's there. But the market as a whole might do something differently. Because the price of copper is going up so much, people in the marketplace have an incentive to go out and look for alternatives to copper. The technology follows the market, so they have an incentive to discover new resources, to find new ways of replacing uses for copper in various technological processes in industry. And that, again, will bring in substitutes, will increase supply. That is how the free market works. It's not perfect because we live in a perfect world, but compared to looking and seeking out some sort of efficiency and equilibrium that doesn't actually ever exist at any given time, this is a real world approach. That's how it works, and this is how we're able to have the industrial society we have today because of that. Obviously, there's a lot of examples then where we don't see that. What happened to the forest? Well, who owns the forest? With logging, I don't understand logging as well as maybe with you might or other people. But the basics of it is, in most cases, either the government owns the land, they provide an incentive by building a road for the loggers to just pay a fee, come in, log all they want, and go and leave. I have a friend who's owned some land and growing trees for as long as he's being a working adult, and his incentive isn't just to log it all and leave just to spare on land enough that it's not worth anything. He's been replanting trees for 30 years because he needed to, he had to, in order to keep value in his land. So that's one example with the forest. The same with fisheries. If all you can do is go through and take all the fish you can from a certain area, you don't have rights to it. That's what you're going to do, and everyone else is going to do the same thing. They're going to pull as much as they can out, and since no one owns it, they don't have an incentive to conserve, to look for alternatives, etc., because they don't have ownership, they don't have property rights entitled to that resource. This is the free market answer then to the part of what we talked about earlier in terms of their looking at the results of what they call capitalism and saying this hasn't worked. And just as a side note, as I think a lot of you have heard over and over again in the media and popular literature, what is termed capitalism, what is termed free market, the free market doesn't exist in America, and it hasn't existed for a while, and in a sense it never fully did. It existed more fully in America than anywhere else in the world ever in time. That's how we became the most powerful nation. But it doesn't exist now, and so when they're talking about evil capitalism or evil greed, sometimes it's true, but it's a matter of incentives and legal structure, not the way the free market really operates. It's like looking at abuses of Christians in the past and saying, that's what's wrong with Christianity, that's not why I'm a Christian, that's the reason why I'm not a Christian. It's a very simplistic approach, and it's really dishonest intellectually for people with PhDs to talk like that, because they know, because of legal structure and incentives, that it's not a free market, but they use it to confuse most people. So we move to the second aspect then of the environment, and that is waste. The